What happened to the Israelis in October 2 years ago is happening on a weekly basis to Nigerian Christians every single week.
Yes.
The same barbarism, the same torture, the rape, the killing, the massacring, the killing babies in mothers' wombs. This is happening every week in Nigeria, and our nation has turned a blind eye to it, and Christians, sadly, have turned a blind eye to it.
You're listening to Faith in Action. I'm your host, Matthew Nowlin.
And I'm Sean Graham.
We lead Conservative Christians of Tennessee, and we're thankful you're listening to this show. Conservative Christians of Tennessee exists to analyze political policy and politicians in Tennessee, and all from a conservative Christian worldview. We want to glorify God by helping you to glorify God, so please don't hesitate to send us any questions or comments via email. You can reach me directly by emailing matthew@tnchristian.com.
Or Sean, SHAWN, @tnchristian.com.
You can find me on X. I'm at MNBookman, and I hope you'll send us an email or that you'll reach out to us on X after this week's show, because we really have an important way that you can put your faith into action. Today's show is sponsored in the West Tennessee area by the #1 lawn care company in the Mid-South, Herbie Systems. Without enough nutrients, your lawn becomes more susceptible to diseases and pests. To effectively keep weeds away from your lawn, trust the experts at Herbie Systems. Call 901-451-8214 today. That's 901-451-8214, and let them kill your weeds. Our scripture for today is from 2 Corinthians 12, verses 10 through 12. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I am become a fool in glorying. Ye have compelled me, for I ought to have been commended of you. For in nothing am I behind the very chiefest apostles, though I be nothing. Truly the signs of an apostle were wrought among you, all in patience and signs and wonders and mighty deeds. We start each week's show with a monologue that sets the tone for our guests. And listeners, I'm going to ask you to bear with me here because this one may sting a little bit. In America today, the church suffers greatly from our own comforts. I realize that's rich coming to you over the airwaves or streaming to you on Apple devices. And I'll tell you, we're both recording this on MacBook Pros, and yet it is true. Our soft Western mindset has made us assume our world in this country is just like the rest of the world. And that's just not the case. Much of the world is filled with monsters. Today, we're going to talk to a great mission director. He's up to his boots in the mud and dirt of the people he serves. He has the blood on his hands from martyred Christians. He's buried children who have died, and he's seen women who were tortured. And that's the hard reality of taking the gospel to a lost and dying world. Now, here is the point that's going to hurt. The hard reality is our own backyards need Jesus just as much as any foreign lands. We hope you're excited to hear how missionaries are reaching places that are unchurched, but that's you and me. We need to dig in and partner with these groups to make this mission happen. We have murder and death taking lives every day here too, in Memphis, Nashville, Clarksville, and we just changed the channel when it comes up on the TV. Whether it's facing down the mean streets of Nashville or the Islamic murder squads in Nigeria, we must change our view of missionaries and the work that must be done. True missions work takes place in the real world, and it is a dark and evil place. But it's still our job to reach all the world, no matter the risk, no matter how far away from our door. Judd, Saul, our guest today, is a family man, an award-winning documentary filmmaker, an entrepreneur, and a missionary who embarked on a call to action in Nigeria in 2011. He and his wife, Sherry, have 5 children, all witnessing the vision unfold when grandfather Dwayne Wessels invited Judd to join him on a mission trip. The trip changed Judd's life forever. Since then, ministering to Nigerians has been a part of Judd's life, regularly serving in Nigeria for over 10 years. He continues to visit 3 to 4 times a year. It was apparent that escalating attacks outpaced the few Christian missions and organizations effectively responding to the attacks. Talking to local ministers and missionaries, Judd decided to start equipping the persecuted to respond and help persecuted Christians in need quickly. The local leadership affirmed there are effective ways to help persecuted Christians in addition to victim aftercare. A proactive, preventative mission was put together with a team of tested by fire pastors, missionaries, and dedicated supporters. And they work to avert crises. They create a boots-on-the-ground presence, and they locally manage equipping the persecuted. And Judd, welcome back to Faith in Action.
Hey, thanks for having me back on.
And man, since we've had you the last time, it feels like there's been a shift somewhat in awareness for Nigeria, but not a whole lot. I saw a Fox News story, and it seems like that was the first time I've seen a major news outlet pick up on the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. And I think that story was about a month ago. Are we unreasonably unaware of what's going on in Nigeria? Like, I feel like this is a big deal. Christians are being killed. Is the average person still clueless? Has there been a change in awareness?
No. There hasn't been a huge shift and change of awareness about the persecution that's going on in Nigeria. A lot of people in the U.S. have been distracted by what Trump says and who he makes fun of this time, or what little strange controversy happens with some celebrity. Now there's guys on the Vikings cheerleading squad. This is what takes up Americans' attention. And of course, you have the Israel-Palestine conflict going on.
Yeah.
But what the world continues to ignore is that what happened to the Israelis in October 2 years ago is happening on a weekly basis to Nigerian Christians every single week.
Yeah.
The same barbarism, the same torture, the rape, the killing, the massacring, the killing babies in mothers' wombs. This is happening every week in Nigeria, and our nation has turned a blind eye to it, and Christians, sadly, have turned a blind eye to it.
Now, when you say we've turned a blind eye to it, I want to understand what you mean by that. Are people hearing about this conflict from you and just saying, go away, I don't want to hear about it anymore? Or I want to assume the best about our Christian brothers and sisters. Are they telling you to go away, or are they just unaware?
Most of them are unaware. The vast majority are completely unaware, because our media doesn't pick it up. Not even the Christian media really picks up on what's happening. By the time it gets to our media here in the U.S., and even if Christian media picks it up, the message has been watered down by the Nigerian government, by their press releases. So like, I'll give you a perfect example. In June, Father's Day in Yelawada, Nigeria, in Benue State, 280 Christians were massacred. Half of them were burned alive. The ones that weren't burned alive were trying to escape being burned alive and were hacked to death with machetes. Children, women, men, I had one guy we've been working with, he lost 34 family members in that attack.
Wow.
And by the time it hit the news here, it said 100 Christians were killed, but it was due to farmer-herder clashes. And then in Europe, they said killings are taking place because of climate change. And even our Christian media got the numbers wrong and said it was, violence against Christians. They wouldn't exactly say, who did what.
Yeah.
But, it just, people largely ignored it. It barely got any coverage whatsoever.
All right. So before I ask a follow-up question, Judd, I know last time we talked that you guys were running a news service of sorts that reported on Islamist violence against Christians in Nigeria. Are you still doing that?
Oh, yeah. And
I want to make sure we get that domain out several times. Where can our listeners go for that news? That's
truthnigeria.com. Now, here's a crazy thing about that attack. Our organization, truthnigeria.com, had information that this attack was going to occur 3 weeks before it happened. We had intelligence, and we issued a terror alert 3 weeks before the attack happened. Now, when Truth Nigeria issues a terror alert, we notified the Nigerian government. We notified the Nigerian police and the military, and they did nothing. They did nothing to prepare. Then we got word, hey, the terrorists are mobilizing. They are going to attack Yelawada. And we issued a terror alert 24 hours before the attack. It said, hey, they're mobilizing. We're seeing boots on the ground. They are going to attack. And for over 5 hours, the military was 1 kilometer away and did not engage and allowed the terrorists to massacre all these people.
Oh, that's a shame. Mm.
So we don't just report on what's going on. We have been issuing terror alerts for the last year and a half. And our terror alerts in 2024 were 89% accuracy. We got better this year in 2025, and we're 100% accurate in our terror alerts.
Yeah. When you issued the alert 3 weeks ahead of time, did you have an approximate date that the attack was supposed to happen?
We had a rough estimate of when it was going to happen. And we knew it was going to happen on Father's Day weekend.
Man. So they just don't listen to you. I mean, do we put the U.S. ambassador to Nigeria listen to you?
Oh, no. The current U.S. ambassador is a Biden holdover. The guy's a total shill, has no spine, has no moral compass to stand for what's right. He's just another guy getting another notch on his political belt to move up the ladder down the road. So hopefully someday he might get France or might get a better country in a couple of years. It's just another notch on his FSO belt, which stands for Foreign Service Officer.
Wow. That boggles my mind because Nigeria has an excellent birth rate. They're becoming less of a Christian country, but they're a Christian nation. It seems to me that there might be one or two nations more in Africa that we as America should have an affinity for, but Nigeria should be near the top of the list. They have a strong Christian presence. We're a Christian nation. We have an administration that is acting in many ways in a very Christian way, in ways that are shockingly Christian. I would think, though, that just strategically long-term, Nigeria would be an important country. We wouldn't want it to fall to Islamists, would we?
Well, we wouldn't want it to fall to Islamists, but just from a U.S. political strategic perspective, we wouldn't want to see Nigeria get completely in the hands of the Russians and the Chinese. With all the natural resources and everything it has to offer to the world, why would we want the Chinese and the Russians to get a strong hold of that? Plus, the other thing we have to look at geopolitically is if Nigeria falls, so does the rest of Africa. And the Chinese and the Russians don't care what theocracy is running it. They don't care if Islam's running things as long as they get their fair share, just like in Iran and like every other country Russia and China have meddled in the Middle East and in Africa. And so they do not care about the Islamist takeover as long as they get their piece of the pie.
Well, in these attacks, just the way they play out with the violence at the end, the massacres, they remind me a lot of attacks that you would read about in Rhodesia, which were carried out against Christians by godless communists, Chinese and Russian trained and funded. They remind me a lot of what you hear about happening in Angola, which was Chinese, Russian, and Cuban funded. So as we find ourselves back in conflict in a new Cold War against China and Russia, is this a new theater of the new Cold War?
I think it will be very, very, very soon if we don't do something about it now, if we don't exude our influence. But during the Biden years, I mean, they took a very proactive, hands-off stance to Africa. They were more concerned about spreading LGBTQ, feminism, all this other nonsense in Nigeria. Well, they knew Nigeria would reject it, but that's what they were spending all their money and efforts on. In fact, I met with the U.S. Embassy in Abuja back in May, and they essentially were like, yeah, we're really upset that they took away USAID, our interfaith dialogues, and these women's empowerment programs were so strong. This is what they were telling me to my face. And I just looked at them plainly. I was like, you guys realize there's a genocide going on and Christians are being massacred? And you guys are worried about interfaith dialogue meetings? I said, do you not know what's going on outside of this embassy? I sat there and chewed them out for 10 minutes, and I gave them pictures, evidence. I gave them dates of attacks. But this is where the mind of our embassy was.
Could we be doing anything in Africa that would more proactively drive these nations to the Chinese and the Russians besides our LGBTQ efforts? I mean, I hate it when it's done here. I'm a conservative Christian. The Christians in Uganda, the Christians in Kenya, the Christians in Nigeria, I mean, I know we've just spanned the continent east to west with that, but does that drive them to the enemy, or does it just drive them away from us?
It drives them away from us, and then that leaves a vacuum in which the enemy has taken hold. And that's exactly what's happening now. And so, like, as the Chinese get their minds and the Russians get their minds and they're selling weapons to the terrorists, who they don't care what's going on. They don't care about the Christians getting slaughtered, massacred. It's just more gravy for them. And then the U.S., like I said, during the Biden years, took a total hands-off stance to it. In fact, they removed Nigeria off the terror watch list. So you remove it off the terror watch list when you know that ISIS is in northern Nigeria, when you know that Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda affiliates in northern Nigeria. Why would you take them off the terror watch list, Democrats? And then we're trying to get Trump administration now to engage to get Nigeria back on the terror watch list, but to also take a very proactive approach to Nigeria, but Africa as a whole. And we're praying and hoping for doors to open in those areas.
What are some things the Trump administration could do to cut the feet out from under these terrorists right away?
First thing is I would say come to Nigeria with a very aggressive investment predicated on a return of investment back to the United States in mineral rights, oil rights, whatever. So the U.S. gets a return of investment on their money, but predicated on the security of the country and the security of the persecuted Christians, and predicated on driving the Fulani terrorists back up north where they came.
Tell our listeners about that. That is the conspiracy, the mob mentality of this land is the police, the government. Everybody is being corrupted or coerced or whatever it is by the Islamic push that's coming through here.
Well, that's correct. Well, I mean, the U.S. has created a vacuum, and when we are not engaged promoting good and promoting U.S. interests, which also just has a byproduct of benefiting a lot of people. And Nigeria is a great place to start because it is a democratic system of government, very corrupt, you might add, but it is a democratic system of government. It's not like we're going into the Middle East like before, trying to start a democracy in an Islamic republic. No, we're already coming in a democratic society, and we can make it better. And it would benefit Nigerians, and it would benefit the United States, and it would put a black eye on our Chinese and Russia adversaries.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to what you said at the beginning, and I want to go back to painting some pictures with words for our listeners. You talked about a Father's Day massacre earlier this year. You talked about, I think, 280 folks that were killed.
Yeah.
That was men, women, and children. Lay out that attack for me, just from an overhead view. How did it start? Were people all pushed into a big building, and that building set? I mean, how did these people end up burned alive?
Okay, so what happened is they set up one force to go engage the local security.
The terrorists set in one force to go engage local security forces. Okay, that's just village security teams with homemade shotguns. While this group engaged those guys, this other group came around behind while people were running into their houses. And this is a small village community. So people were running in for protection and probably trying to find ways to get away. But then when the village security teams were engaged by the terrorists up here, they came in, flanked the village, started shooting, and people started running into their homes. And they started just going from house to house to house, throwing gas and fuel into the houses and setting them on fire as quick as they could. And then as people were trying to escape, they were shot and hacked to death with machetes. You said something that was...
And they did this for over 4 hours.
4 hours. You said something that struck me as, I think, as an American particularly. You said the village security went with homemade shotguns. And in my mind, I go back to J.D. Vance talking in Europe last week to the NATO summit, where he said, you guys are violating a right that's important to Americans. You're violating the freedom of speech of your citizens. But here we see Nigeria, a basic right of citizens in that country is violated by government decree, and that's the right to keep and bear arms. How much would a simple right to keep and bear arms change the security picture in Nigeria for Christians?
It would change it overnight. It would change it overnight because then the enemy, the Fulani terrorists, have rocket-propelled grenades. They got AK-47s. But if you give the right for Nigerians to arm themselves, things would change overnight. It would change in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But the problem is, the terrorists are running around with guns, and then the Christians that try to obtain real weapons get a slap on the wrist. They get thrown in jail. They get disarmed.
Yeah.
They get punished for breaking the law while the terrorists are just roaming around free, killing people with weapons. And so this is, again, another proven point why the Second Amendment is necessary and why we should never give up our Second Amendment.
Could our president, through through his Department of State, through Marco Rubio, and through the Department of the Treasury, put enough pressure on the Nigerian government to have this right recognized for Christians in Nigeria.
Where there's a will, there's a way. If the United States had willpower to exercise its power and authority and really lay heavy on Nigeria, I think we can get a lot done. And I think a lot of lives could be saved. Them getting a Second Amendment, not quite sure, but I can guarantee you with a little bit of U.S. influence, I'm talking a little bit in the grand scheme of things would change overnight in Nigeria.
And from my perspective, that would be even better than us sending in, much better than us sending in the military and getting involved in another Vietnam.
I completely agree. And if you give them a will and give them ability, they would fight and combat the terrorists and push them back.
And that I want to talk to that for a second. The ability, that's what you work with. You help in orphanage. You help in, the actual on the ground life of these people. And here in America, we're talking about tariffs a lot. And I know that the income export thing is all those rates being changed. It's affecting a lot of economies. Is it affecting how you're getting supplies into Nigeria to help these people?
It hasn't really affected that much. We try to be as careful as possible with how we spend our money, and we spend as much money as we can on the ground in Nigeria. We try to buy it in Nigeria. It helps the local economy in Nigeria. The only things that we bring from the States that's harder to get there is like, laptops, certain electronic things, which the price is so jacked up over there by the time you get it. And plus you don't know what you're getting. You could be getting a counterfeit Dell that looks like a Dell that ain't a Dell, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But when it comes to food, clothing, all those other necessities, we buy it locally. Now they've seen a vast inflation increase, just like we have, in fact, worse. So their inflation, their currency, the cost of goods is shot through the roof. They're worse than the U.S. because there's such an income disparity. I mean, there's massive poverty in Nigeria. So if something, cost $1, to them there, and it's now $3, that is a huge cut in their budget, especially when the average Nigerian's making less than $100 a month.
Wow.
Right.
So we've seen the economy effects where things have gotten more expensive to buy there, but it's worse there than it is here. Those are the challenges going on right now.
Yeah.
Is the U.S. dollar still strong in Nigeria?
Very strong. The U.S. dollar is very strong in Nigeria. And in fact, they like it when we go to Nigeria, when we exchange things, they liked us to bring U.S. dollars for them to change things in, because it's very powerful there.
And does that create security risks for you?
Not really. We got a guy.
Okay. Okay.
Listeners, you've heard Judd, Saul, and Equipping the Persecuted. This is an amazing ministry, and we're going to ask you right now, we would love for you to partner with Judd. You've heard the work they're doing. You've heard the mission. You've heard the conflict. This is a gospel mission to a Christian nation that's being oppressed. Listeners, we want to ask you to partner with Judd. Judd, what's the best way for our listeners to send money and directly affect your operation?
equippingthepersecuted.org. That's our website, equippingthepersecuted.org. There's other websites that have the word persecuted in it. Do not go to those. Go to equippingthepersecuted.org. We're a boots on the ground mission, working with Nigerians every day, responding to attacks within 48 hours. If you want to get the job done in Nigeria, partner with Equipping the Persecuted.
So Equipping the Persecuted. I just have a radio voice, Judd, so I'm going to say it so people go to it. Yeah. Equippingthepersecuted.org, your other website for accurate news from Nigeria that accurately portrays the persecution of Christians. Of truthnigeria.com.
And also we're issuing terror alerts. And I know this for a fact. We are read by the other embassies in Nigeria. Other foreign governments are reading what we're putting out. Even Nigerian politicians are reading our news to actually find out what's going on. And if you don't mind me saying this real fast, you got to understand how Nigeria news works. News only gets out if a Nigerian government official says it's going to happen. So if a Nigerian government official calls a press conference, then the news gets out. But if a Nigerian government official doesn't acknowledge a news conference, it never happened.
Wow. Well, Judd, we're about to the end of this show. Can you stay on a little longer? This is important. Sure. This is about Christians being killed. We have plenty of material left to cover. And I think, Sean,
I think our listeners are hungry for this kind of information. This is truth. We need this in every pew. So listeners, I hope you'll join us again for another episode with Judd.
Folks, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Faith in Action. In light of what we've talked about, I don't feel grand, but I do feel encouraged in one thing, and that's a very old promise from the 15th chapter of the book of Exodus. True every time we say it, the Lord shall reign forever and ever.